Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to kind of almost see you. I have to admit, I was really hoping that we'd all be in a room together by this time. But we are just so excited that you're joining us in this space for another partner convening. We know that you probably all feel like you have spent way more than enough time on Zoom. But just know if you've got any questions during the session, you can look for Tiffany, Megan Tripp for technical support. We're just like, again, both, I'm feeling very bittersweet. I'm excited that we're here and I wish that I could see you all in a room. Once more, just really grateful to Monty Roulier and the CI team, Community Initiatives, for joining us and agreeing to play this kind of slight MC role, as well as all of the planning that has led to today and the next couple of days. It was a great partnership and it continues to be a great partnership. And so Monty, I'm going to turn this to you. And if I didn't introduce myself, hi, I'm Liz Baxter. I'm the CEO here at North Sound ACH. And Monty, I will slip it to you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Liz, and greetings, everyone. It's really wonderful to be sharing space with you and to be on this journey with you. We're really grateful for it. And I think having all of you, 150 almost now, carve out the better part of 3 days to be together holds enormous promise for this, emerging, growing, evolving network. And so CI, including Elizabeth and Stacy and I, are really excited about just being here to maximize your time to support your process. And as you'll hear, this was very much a co-created agenda. So many of you that are on this Zoom right now had a hand directly or indirectly in that, and excited about kind of how that unfolds together. I see many of you putting your names in the chat already, has kind of become customary. So thank you for that. If you haven't had a chance, please do put your name, pronouns, and organization or community in the chat. And also, if you haven't, you can click on your name in the box just to kind of have your full name and pronouns, if you don't mind, there, just so we can see that as we're kind of engaging over Zoom. So again, I think we have an amazing couple of days ahead of us, including today. And as always, just to start our time and to begin with really a land acknowledgement. And so Liz, maybe you'd be willing to share and read the land acknowledgement to kick us off.
Great. Thank you, Monty. We begin by acknowledging with humility that the land where we are today is the territory of the people of the Salish Sea. Their presence is imbued in the waterways, shorelines, valleys, and mountains of the traditional homelands of the Coast Salish people since time immemorial. We have a link to a site, and one of these days we're just going to ask you all to put in your names or pronouns and like where is the indigenous land where you are during this meeting. It's really a profound thing to go to that site and share that information. For us, this land acknowledgement, it's something that we read out loud and internally, externally, at least once a day, and it grounds us to the space where we are, but it also is a helpful thing for us to just make sure that we are paying attention. The tribes here in the North Sound region are critically important partners. They have taught us so much, and you'll see and feel their influence over the next couple of days. And it's one of the things that led us to having a full-time tribal liaison position here in our team. And so Michaela is going to join us now and share some information about some work that we're doing and kind of to get us grounded in this tribal acknowledgement piece. So Michaela, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Liz. Hash Lahale. It means good day in Lushootseed, one of the languages, dialects of the Salish Sea. My name is Michaela Vendiola. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm an enrolled member of the Walker River Paiute tribe, which is in northern Nevada, and I'm enrolled through my mother's side. My father is Swinomish. He's a member of the Swinomish Indian tribal community, and my brother and I were raised on the Lummi Nation. So again, Hash Lahale, good day to you. Happy to be here with you all. I serve as the Tribal and Community Liaison for North Sound ACH, and I've been in this role just over a year now, so I'm really excited to share one piece of the work that we've had going on in the last 3 years now. In November 2021, the North Sound Indigenous Futurity Alliance hosted Rena Priest as the keynote speaker for the second annual North Sound Indigenous Youth and Young Leaders Conference, Health, Wellness, and Indigenous Futurity. Amy Nichols of the Samish Indian Nation and one of the lead youth planners on our advisory board for this conference asked that Rena Priest be the keynote speaker for the 2021 Native Youth Conference. Rena Priest is an enrolled member of the Lactamish Nation, or some of you might know it as Lummi Nation. She has been appointed to serve as the Washington State Poet Laureate for the term April 2021 through 2023. She is a 2020 Vedon Foundation Fellow and the recipient of an Allied Arts Foundation Professional Poets Award. Her debut collection, Patriarchy Blues, was published by Moonpath Press and received an American Book Award. Her second collection, Sublime Subliminal, is available from Floating Bridge Press. Individual poems are featured at poets.org, Poetry Northwest, A Dozen Nothing, and elsewhere. Please learn more about Rena Priest at the link renapriest.com. It should be put into the chat. Next, we're going to see a clip of the Native Youth Conference that occurred in 2021, part of Rena Priest's keynote speech, and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
And this is called Beach Fire. Measure wealth by how well you enjoy the hours, fluttering by in praise of sunshine and the ocean breeze, whispering love songs across waves that kiss the beach. This wealth takes work and absolutely no work at all. Fluttering by in praise of sunshine and the ocean breeze, don't mistake leisure for laziness. This gratitude is rigorous. This wealth takes work and absolutely no work at all. This gift of a moment to be alive, to feel at peace, don't mistake leisure for laziness. To be filled up and satisfied by a day at the beach, this gratitude is rigorous. It means your heart fire flames a lovely heat. To be filled up and satisfied by a day at the beach, you could toast marshmallows by that warmth. It means your heart fire flames a lovely heat. The glowing embers, a boundless source of power. You could toast marshmallows by that warmth, whispering love songs across waves that kiss the beach. The glowing embers, a boundless source of power. Measure wealth by how well you enjoy the hours.
Thank you, team. So right now we're gonna just offer you an opportunity to answer some of the question or the question in the chat. What phrase stood out to you? And there should be another one. Or what feelings are coming up for you in relation to this poem? Feel free to put it into the chat or come off mute if you wish. Thank you all for participating. Please continue to put those reflections into the chat. What phrases stood out to you, or what feelings are coming up for you? And at this time, I'm going to transition it back to Monty, or over to Monty, to go over these convening. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. That's beautiful. I see a lot of not mistaking leisure for laziness, and yeah, a lot of other meaningful phrases in that beautiful poem. And Michaela, thanks so much for your leadership in the Food Charity Alliance, and also for a lot of your insights and contribution to planning for this convening. Really appreciate that. And again, so many others that have contributed to the agenda. And these couple slides just kind of share the overarching goals for the convening. And it's, kind of as we have in past years, really to hone in on or stepping back a bit to reflect on how well are we moving towards achieving the North Star of advancing a just and inclusive culture in North Sound, and knowing that that has to happen through this strong regional collaborative action network. There's been a lot of evolution even in the last year, which we're going to kind of touch on here momentarily, and knowing that the only way we're going to achieve these aspirations together, this North Star, is really deepening relationships. So a lot of the design here is for you all to deepen relationship with folks that you know well and some people that you may not know as well, and to co-create, really plan for the next stages of this journey. So that's the larger arc of the next 3 days. And today in particular, a little bit of a shorter day, is really going to be focused on two things. So the first part of the session is really to ground ourselves in kind of the milestones, all the things that have kind of evolved over the last year plus, and really what we're seeing from different vantage points, signs of progress. So where we've been, where we're heading, and then to spend essentially the second part of our time together today is rooted in a value that has been with this network from close to the very beginning, which is really this idea of belonging. And we're going to have a chance to really start to explore and continue to deepen our understanding of what it means to belong and to bridge to through differences. So that's kind of the goal for today, and would love to maybe just pivot into that very first part around milestones and progress. And we're lucky to have Liz and a couple of other partners that are going to share a little bit around what this starts to look like. And then we're going to provide some time in some breakout groups for you all to kind of bring your perspective into this. So I think maybe on the next slide here, Elizabeth, if I'm not mistaken. Well, I'll hold off on that. Sorry for Liz. So Liz, I guess maybe if you wouldn't mind kicking us off with a little bit of where we've been, where are we now? Where are we heading? From your vantage point, that would allow others to kind of layer into that and can invite some of our peers into that conversation in just a moment.
Thanks, Monty. And I have to say, it's one of the most challenging questions for me always is like, what's the history of the North Sound ACH and how did we get here? Because it gets very wonky really quickly. But, probably the thing that I do want to acknowledge from the beginning, and, the notion of how we do co-creation really requires that we are in concert with each other. And I feel like we're leveraging the heck out of Zoom and Jamboards and a lot of things, but, just acknowledging its imperfections and its inadequacies as we try and do this work. I think we've been realizing that for the last 3-ish years. So, but I wanted to just give you a bit of a snapshot of kind of how we came into being. There's language that, partners who've been with us for the last 4 or 5 years here. But in 2014, North Sound ACH was formed, and it was formed by a table of 37 organizations. They were centered at the Whatcom Alliance for Health Advancement, or WAHA, here in Whatcom County. And it was with the notion that somehow if we could work and think and strategize across traditional jurisdictional boundaries, that we could do good things. And this group that came together was thinking 10 years out, 20 years out, just how do we actually shape community health and population health? And I often recall it was probably the representative on this body from Lummi Nation who said, it's really easy to think broadly before there is a single dollar on the table. And when dollars come, conversations change. So in 2015, the state of Washington agreed that there would be 2 pilot ACHs, and North Sound was one of those. And they received some funding through the federal government, the state innovation model, to form governance, and for us to try and figure out, could we actually kind of craft a project together, which we were successful in doing. 2016, we separated from WAHA, became an independent nonprofit corporation, therefore had to build our own board of directors and rethink our governance. And it wasn't until 2017 that this Medicaid transformation project came into being. State of Washington was awarded a 5-year waiver to do some creative things around system transformation. And, it occurred very early in 2017. And we just kind of fell into this sequence of, there are some projects, there were measures, metrics, outcomes that we were looking at. But the ACH would not be able to accomplish any of that without kind of a cadre of partners. So we have put a lot of commitment into building this partner network. But what we realized in this waiver period is that our partners were working with the ACH and reporting things to the ACH, and not necessarily did we have outcomes about how partners work together. And so it actually was late in 2017 that we brought partners together for the first time, and have tried to do that early in the year and here in the summer since 2017. So these partner convenings have been just a really important part of our work. And apologies for Zoe in the background if you can hear her. What happened during this waiver period, and they're the things that I have down at the bottom, COVID, hitting our region early in 2020, the Department of Health deciding to launch its own care coordination network, Care Connect Washington, which included using some COVID money to form Washington Listens. And we now have an expansion of Washington Listens here in the North Sound region. We have had disasters upon disasters. We had probably 3 consecutive summers with wildfire smoke blanketing our region from British Columbia fires, as well as our own Washington fires. And then this last fall with just greater than 100-year flood here in Whatcom and Skagit counties. And then we've had just this, unbelievable humanitarian crisis with families leaving both Afghanistan and Ukraine and making their way into one of our 5 counties, and many of you working with them to try and find a way to get settled. And then, as you may know, the state of Washington just about a month ago submitted a new waiver application looking forward at the next 5 years. And the work of the ACH is embedded in that new waiver application. So while we might have been thinking we had this influx of dollars to a moment in time, we now actually can begin to do that thinking and looking forward 10 years from now, 20 years from now, which is pretty exciting. But if you go to the next slide, the thing that I want to just emphasize is that the other thing that happened for us in 2016, being introduced to targeted universalism, sending our entire team to the Equity Summit in Chicago, getting to meet John Powell spending time here with our board partners and staff in the North Sound region to try and figure out how targeted universalism isn't just this aspirational thing, but how do we build that into the everydayness of our work. Spend a lot of time with him and others from the Othering and Belonging Institute about what that means to be looking at belonging as both a practice and a goal, bridging instead of breaking, and then in 2019 being introduced to the vital conditions for well-being. The reason I call those out, they influenced how we dealt with COVID, how we dealt with access to vaccine and testing, how it is that we stepped into different care coordination options, language access, how it is that we stepped in with both the state and counties around disaster response. These core values became a part of all of the work and kind of how we approach the work looking forward. And through all of that, we have brought partners together to come and influence the decisions of the ACH. So it was partners who made the recommendation, do we do all 8 projects in the Medicaid Transformation Project? We had a program council that was incredibly robust and, just did a lot of work to get us to that decision. When we realized funds were coming to the region, we had a fund allocation committee comprised of partners who helped us figure out things like, do we use money over 5 years or over 7 years? How do we leverage these dollars to help partners? Do we give money to large organizations or small organizations? And how do we try and kind of create an equitable distribution there? We had partners who were part of what we called a future state group. And that group worked through some scenarios. When the Medicaid Transformation Project is done, do we just close our doors? Do we try and stay in place for as long as there are those Medicaid dollars, or do we look into the future with other opportunities? And so they were working with us while the board was having very, very similar conversations. This notion of how we decide what our space is has been so heavily influenced by partners who've been with us since 2017, as they have done reporting to us every 6 months. NICA and others on our team pull from those reports, where is it that partners saw opportunities? Where did they see needs that could be mitigated if there were additional resources or other types of partnerships? And all of those pieces about 18 months ago went into this idea of us building this network, bringing people together in cohorts and work groups, because the biggest thing we wanted to change was the federal government and the state could continue to tell regions like North Sound ACH, here's what we'll pay you to do. And we wanted to flip that and have our partners say, if there are additional dollars coming to the region, here's where we think those dollars could best be used and best be leveraged. So as imperfect of a process as we have with imperfect tools, because of our inability to actually just be in rooms and see all the intersections together, some pretty amazing things are already beginning to emerge from those discussions. We'll go to the next slide. I think the next ones are really just a reminder of both where the ACH is and what the things are that partners have committed to. We had a mission statement that was that the ACH was here in order to improve health across the 5 county regions. What you see in front of you is a purpose statement that our board voted in December of 2020 to replace that focus on improving health with what you see in front of you to advance a just and inclusive culture and the necessary conditions required for all community members to thrive. So if I add that to that list of the targeted universalism and belonging, this is now driving where do we put our energy and what we see moving forward. We'll go to the next slide. And so the folks who have become part of the network have all signed a document where they are agreeing to some shared beliefs, some common approaches, and some commitments. And again, not commitments to the ACH, but commitments to each other. And so what you see here is the section on the shared beliefs around all community members deserve to experience mental, social, physical, financial, and spiritual well-being. And our team has really, I'm just going to say in the last 8 or 9 months, this has been one that has been first of mind, just because of who was most impacted by the flooding and who has had the hardest time accessing resources after the flooding. This notion that we have inherited legacies of systemic racism, they've perpetuated trauma and exclusion, particularly among Indigenous populations and communities of color. The belief that we can actually create new legacies and the conditions that ensure that sense of belonging for everyone who calls this region their home, and that we're accountable to each other and to the well-being of future generations. So all of these pieces, partners were a part of crafting these and refining these, and we then included them in our contractual language. The next slide. We have some guiding principles, and these are from 2017 and all the way forward. The fact that we honor tribal sovereignty is something that was part of my very first board meeting in October of 2016. And that was a commitment on the part of the board. And there are many ways that the board carries out that principle. The tribes have been incredibly generous in sharing with us approaches that they have carried since time immemorial around how you get to whole person well-being, healing, and stewardship. And they shaped how we took those 8 project areas from the Medicaid Transformation Project and turned them into 4 initiatives in the work that we did. The place-based work is critically important. We use targeted universalism as our framework, and trying to do that in a way that allows us to find that universal goal and to come up with unique strategies that will allow everyone in every community to reach that goal. So we do reject the notion that, you know, sometimes there isn't a way, or there's not enough money, or there's not enough something else. The notion of zero-sum approaches is just not in our in our framework. And then belonging, which I think when Kimberly speaks, you'll probably hear more about this, but that it is both part of the vital conditions for well-being and it is a practice. And so how we continue to learn and get better. I sometimes go back to our very first partner learning session, which was about the intersection of race and health in the fall of 2017. And Ben Duncan, a colleague from Portland, introduced us to the notion of failing forward. And so we know that we're not where we want to be, but that if we can agree that this is the principle that's guiding us, we feel like we can get better each and every time. Is there one more slide? So this is a visual of kind of how we've envisioned this network. For those of you who are part of cohorts, and not everyone on the call is part of a cohort, but I know most of you are, we've got these commitments, the guiding principles, those shared beliefs. We do have people kind of selected, self-selected into those cohorts. Again, with our desire that those were going to cross, they were going to intersect, they were going to intertwine. We're going to hopefully be doing a big chunk of that tomorrow. So we have cohort meetings, we've got monthly learning sessions that continue, and all of that looking at, you know, if you look across the bottom, this notion of co-creation and co-design, and that we are looking at belonging, inclusion, and civic muscle. Those are pieces of the vital conditions for well-being. I don't know if there's one more slide. I'm just going to keep going. Oh, all right. So, you know, this idea that we have, I remember when I first described it to the board, you know, I said, this is an experiment. And, you know, it really comes from what we have learned from our partners, our board, that there's so much wealth of experience and knowledge and expertise. And that comes from people who are paid to do their job and people who volunteer to do work in community. And we have been in all layers of those spaces, that we actually believe if we can have the policy driven by those who know what's happening on the ground, we can actually get to better policy and find some creative, sometimes new and sometimes continuing projects that we should be focused on. And so the ACH certainly has some resources to bring to the table, but we also believe that there are others who have resources to bring to the table. We are not the totality of the pie that's here, but we certainly want to be a part of working with you all to see just how far we can get as we look into the coming year, the coming 5 years, the coming 10 years. So with that, I am going to give it back, Monty, probably to you, and see where we are.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Liz, for kind of taking us down memory lane and kind of reminding us of kind of how we got here, how, including the why of, this pivot from Medicaid transformation work to really this network that is co-created, that's driven by a core set of beliefs. And just as you suggested, this has been shaped by partners all along, and we thought we might just invite 3 partners. I think we hopefully have Jacque Julien from the Communities of Color Coalition, C3, among other hats. And I think Will Rice, another relatively new partner from Catholic Community Services, and then Beratta Gomillion as well from Center for Human Services. Wanted just to invite them in to kind of share their story. As a network, we all have different pieces of the puzzle. We all have different experiences. And so maybe as a starting point to ask, I'm not sure if Will is here yet.
Yeah.
But Jacque, oh, there's Will. Great, welcome each one of you. So that would just kind of invite you all to take a few minutes to kind of tell your story around kind of how you've been connected to personally and your evolution, if you will. And Jacque, I know you the best, and kind of some of the work that you've done, and now even sitting on the board, your connection to the North Sound ACH. And what you're seeing as milestones, where you're seeing progress, and kind of what that's meant to you, and kind of where you're seeing a value add, and have each one of you do that for a few minutes, and would love to kind of loop back to kind of look a little bit to the future. So maybe Jacque, if you don't mind, I'll invite you to share a little bit around your story and where you're seeing the value add and milestones.
I love you, Monty, writing. We've been in community so long. I'm like, what happens right when we go off script? And I say, I do mind. Why do we invite Will and our other folks to join? I'm just kidding. Hi, all. Welcome. I'm Jacque Julien. I am the inaugural executive director for Communities of Color Coalition. I'm going to answer your question, Monty, how I'm connected in this space. I think this is the beauty of the intersections, right? Like two things, one can exist. And so one, I serve on the board, North Sound ACH board. And then I'm also connected in this collaborative network. So, co-designing, co-creating, one sharing our experience, our wisdom, our knowledge. It's a little bit of how I'm connected. Right, those haven't always overlapped. And so navigating new territory in many ways. But I think that is also one an important milestone for me to hit. Again, listening, Liz, thank you for going over, what our shared beliefs, our values and principles. I think that going back to what was shared of centering those with lived experience, come in with a lot of lived experience on the work that we do in our organization centers, those that are being most harmed was lived experience. And I think to kind of build off of your question was perhaps what are some important milestones that I see in the shared work. I think some of the things, that perhaps have been mentioned, I think we're kind of honing in, and examining, as Liz shared in full transparency. This is an experiment. We collectively inherited a system that we're all grappling with in the midst of compounding traumas. And so there's a commitment to get it right, to lean in, listen and learn and hold space and build those build systems, that aren't dependent on systems, if that makes sense. So build structures that aren't dependent on our current systems, that aren't supporting. And so, I think a clear sense of how community is represented and centered and how we care for them. And this space is a milestone as we collectively are all convened in this space. We're representing, our respective organizations. But again, going back to centering those in the community, I think a milestone is an area for us to improve, is outside of having, shared definition and language of, partners of how are we intentionally centering one community, as I see a lot of organizations represented in this space. And so I'll pause there and let other folks join in, but yes, thank you. Space as well.
Thanks for kicking us off, Jacque. And, as somebody who has been there in many ways since the beginning and wearing different hats, so enjoyed briefly meeting you, Will. And I think you have a really different story, somebody that didn't start off as one of the original partners. And, as you said, kind of shared some lanes, but not exactly. Now they're seeing some merging together. I'll let you share that. So would love to just hear your story of how you're seeing the milestones in your work and world differently, in partnership with ACH.
I made the error of talking before hitting mute. Thank you very much, Monty, and it's an honor and a privilege, Liz. Thanks for bringing up my name to come and kind of talk for just a couple minutes and kind of kick off a little bit of this. Yes, as you were showing the history of the ACH, I think I was at some early WAHA meetings way back before it was the ACH, and and I was reflecting back of what was happening 5 years ago in Washington State, and being a agency director of a large Medicaid behavioral health agency. 5 years ago, our world was getting turned upside down because the state was engaging in a transformation of how they purchase Medicaid services. And they were essentially privatizing the Medicaid business in Washington State. So instead of having government or quasi-governmental organizations really managing Medicaid dollars, they moved it all to managed care organizations, some of which were for-profit and are currently traded on the stock exchanges that were profit-driven. So our world was getting turned upside down, and right about that same time, WAHA was transitioning to the ACH, and there was this whole other process going on, which was really the Medicaid transformation and the development of the ACHs. And I, for one, was incredibly confused as to how these two horses got out of the barn at the same time, and were they related or not related. I mean, it was just from my vantage point, it was very confusing. And so, perfectly honestly, we're a big agency, super busy. We just kind of kept our head down and said, okay, we're just going to keep serving the people we serve and do what we do. And had as Liz came on board, a couple of very brief introduction meetings, but really didn't do a lot with the ACH. There wasn't a whole lot of intersection. Now, fast forward probably about 3 years or so, and COVID happened. Everyone started scrambling about how are we going to serve the people that we are dedicated to serve. And I have to say the outreach from the ACH through connecting to the state around getting masks and all that stuff that was happening was just so phenomenal. Some relationships started getting built with the ACH and some shared goals. And then fast forward again to the last November, and North Whatcom County, which is where my home is, but our agency obviously is all of North Sound. A devastating flood happened in the north part of our county, and hundreds of families were displaced. And as we are apt to do as a Catholic Charities agency, with some a little bit of competency in working in disaster conditions, we were, what do we do? How can we do it? And from that, it's one of those, there's some saying, I never get things right, but born out of necessity, a child that's born out of necessity, grows strong. The relationship that got developed with the ACH around our disaster response is something I am absolutely proud of. And I think in conversations with Liz, we at one point we stopped and said, this is really funny because we tried to get together to do some things and really couldn't do it. But it was really when essentially, our wagons or our cars started driving parallel on the road that we kind of looked over and said, hey, we could do this better if we do this together. And really, I think not just Liz and I, but our agencies really started operating together in unison around some very shared goals and shared practices, like what do the people need and how can we get it there the fastest, most humane, most equitable, with honoring dignity. And we really, really worked together hard for, way too long. In my, not that it was too long, but the hardness of the work lasted way too long. And I think really landed us in a place, I feel like, of really feeling like a partner now with the North Sound ACH. That it's not, and Liz, I loved what you said, it's not about what the state was directing the ACHs to do now, it's really about what does the communities need? And that value of really trying to respond to community requests and then say, does our basket of resources and competencies match with what some of those requests are? That's how, in my mind, community development happens. And that's how correct response happens. It's really listening and then saying, do we have something that could be of value here? And I just really think that that through the last 2 years, partnering with the ACH has been one of the things I am absolutely most proud of, and part of it was because we were so in our own lane, that it really was a very easy transition. And I am one who's very optimistic about where this goes. And I think I saw a little glimmer of it. And I was trying to remember who said it, but someone said something about, so many of our structures are built up around counties or municipalities, and people don't live in counties or municipalities. They live in communities, and some communities, being one of, in Whatcom County, there's a strong between Whatcom and Skagit County. If you live in Alger, what county do you really belong to? And it's an arbitrary line. It's really about communities. And I think as we look at structures of networks that bridge governmental entities, we get to a stronger position. And I really think, and being part of an agency that does spread across so much geography, I really do see the value of entities that can help broaden the perspectives of municipalities or governments that are focused only on their boundaries. And I think the North Sound could really, I'm really optimistic that this wider view is part of the answer that does involve tribal sovereignty and does involve cities and counties that can help see past what their limitations are to what's possible. The other one thing that I just want to say before handing it off is I'm also incredibly optimistic that with the gathering of the network of partners that the ACH has really developed, so many more answers are going to come out of the stakeholders, because that's kind of what I see this as. This is stakeholders. These are community members and organizations that are invested in outcomes. And that's a very different recipe of a stew versus groups that are comprised of funders or regulators. Not that there aren't funders and regulators here, but I really get the sense that the North Sound Network is really about outcomes and community impact. And I think that in itself will help direct much more of the opportunities that come our way in being better stewards of the public and the poor's money, because that's really kind of how I see all the dollars that flow into our coffers. This isn't our money. This is the poor's money that we're here to manage and try to do something good with. So with that, I hope the optimism comes through, and just really the gratitude for North Sound ACH and Liz and her incredible staff.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I see a lot of folks really resonating with this notion that we live in community, we live in relation with each other. this is rooted and the values need to be rooted and, borrowed on Jackie's point, lived experience of what communities bring. We don't live in counties. We don't live in these administrative barriers or boundaries. And yeah, with Beratta, you have such rich experience in behavioral health and a lot of other areas in the state, and with the North Sound, wondering what's coming up for you and where you're seeing milestones.
Thank you. I am Beratta Gomillion. I'm Executive Director of the Center for Human Services, or CHS. We serve Snohomish County. I'm just really happy to be here today to be able to share some of our experiences, because this has been a feel-good story since the very beginning that we've been working with the ACH. We have met a lot of milestones through the direction and the help of the ACH. We were facing Medicaid transformation and really didn't know where we were going with it. And by working with the initiatives that the ACH had put out, it gave us direction. And I want to share some of those milestones with you, but the one that I am probably most proud of is the work that we did around capacity building, and particularly around our work with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Our agency went all in. That's kind of the best way I can say it. We started working with consultants, and I mean intensive work with consultants who were DEIB experts. We're still working with them. We've been doing it for 2 years now. And also we provided our leadership team, our top directors, individual coaching opportunities with DEIB experts. We were so inspired that we created a DEIB program of its own. We'd never had that before. And we hired a DEIB manager who is part of our primary leadership team. So now we've got somebody that focuses just on DEIB. It's in the forefront of everything we do. It's not an afterthought. It is part of what we do now. And that feels so good. We also, we adopted a land acknowledgement statement through that work. We have done a lot of different kinds of trainings with our DEIB program. It has been phenomenal. But all of our work with these initiatives, I think, has been transformative for us. Through the care coordinating initiative, we did a lot of work around acute care transitions and transitional care after incarceration. With the acute care piece of it, we started using collective medical daily. So that's part of our routine. When one of our clients is hospitalized or goes to an emergency room, we're notified and we are able to respond to that individual immediately, same day or next day. And that is just really key in behavioral health, I think, to get connected really early. And we work with the county jail to provide substance use assessments while a client's incarcerated. And if treatment is indicated, we would facilitate that transfer to either inpatient or residential treatment, or be sure that they actually made it to their first appointment with an outpatient program when released. And so the care coordination initiative was really big to our behavioral health team. And the care transformation initiative, I have to say that our substance use department jumped all over that one too. Mostly it's been around opioid and use and misuse. We now have naloxone at every location. We train all of our staff about how to use it, and we do that during our new staff orientations. And we dispense the Narcan kits to our clients and to the public. We put up posters about prevention and intervention at all of our sites. We began a regimen of postings about opioid prevention and intervention on our Facebook pages. And our director of our substance use department has conducted a number of trainings for the courts and other places on prevention, intervention, and reversal of opioids. So I'm really proud to say that we have become a leader in the opioid prevention intervention range. And we also, part of the transformation, we had to make some major changes to how we did business. We totally changed some of the things that we were doing with our intake assessment process. We're asking about well child checks, and we're asking about immunizations and chronic health conditions. You know, all of those things, and we're asking at intake so we can make the linkages so we can treat and work with the whole person instead of just part of the person. You know, we implemented a tool that we developed so that we could address social determinants of health with every client that we have. Once, if a problem area is identified. So those were pretty big to our way of doing business. And we also made a lot of progress on the strategy about implementing integrated behavioral health services in primary care settings. We now have embedded therapists in 5 different medical clinics in Snohomish County. And we were even evaluated by United Healthcare. They did a readiness evaluation for us to determine how we were doing with integration. And at their final audit with us, they put us at the highest level that they give. That's a level 6, meaning that we have full collaboration in an integrated system. And we're really, really proud of that as well. And I'll end, I could keep going forever, but I'll end by just saying that how much we also appreciate the ACH for their multiple trainings. They have provided us some excellent trainings, I believe, and they've all been free of charge. You know, you can't ask for more than that. We're very grateful for their help with COVID by giving us supplies for our staff and for our clients. And we're also very appreciative of supplying us with the Narcan kits, and just the opportunity to network with other organizations has been really helpful to us. So our work, I think, has been phenomenal with the ACH, and we're excited about the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Beratta. It's really amazing to hear of all that and hearing lots of threads of kind of the change culture, how this network has influenced the change in culture and practice. I have Beverly Porter. Randomly, you're on my screen and I saw you clapping as you're hearing. And I just thank you, Jacque and Will and Beratta, for kicking us off. These are just 3 stories and experiences, and we wanted to give other partners a chance to kind of share a little bit in small groups, you know, how you're connected to the ACH, what your experience and story is around milestones. And again, it doesn't mean that this is all perfect. What's your experience? Where are we seeing progress, and what are you excited about in the future? So we're going to put those questions in the chat. Thank you, Stacy, for doing that. And I think Tiffany and team, as always, is going to put us miraculously into breakout groups. So 15-ish minutes in breakout groups, and we'll kind of come back. So enjoy.
Two groups back. So Tiffany, the groups still aren't done yet.
No, the 14 minutes is in 27 seconds. There's a countdown. I did it. Well, so there's my timer. So they should be here any moment.
Thanks.
Great. Welcome back. We'll let everybody get back in this Zoom room before we get going. Tiffany, as always, thank you for your magic and putting us in and out of Zoom room here. And probably about half of us are back, but those half that are here we have a few minutes before we take a break. You know, if would love to hear ideas either in the chat, if you'd like to name something that was significant that came out of your small group around a milestone, what you're excited about, or, you know, raise your hand or speak up. Would love to just hear a couple before we make our way into break. Looks like we have everybody back. Who would be a brave soul, maybe willing to share something? And again, hoping that we have some ideas in chat. Is that Tristan?
Hi, yeah, Tristan Kwan, with a mental health counselor with Lydia Place there. Yeah, I think, you know, this is my first meeting with the North Sound ACH, and the prevailing thing that I came away with hearing the stories from the provider partners here is how the North Sound ACH has been able to connect, especially with COVID, to connect people with the real tangible resources necessary in order to serve our client populations, but also the ways in which the guiding principles and these commitments that we are all coming here to make have really helped to energize conversations, both at an administrative level and from just sort of an everyday operating stance. And though I don't have any milestones myself, I'm excited to be getting to experience this, be a part of it.
Thanks for that, Tristan. Yeah, and welcome. Kind of reflecting that as a new member of the partnership. Yes, is it Danita who had her hand up a minute ago?
I did. Thank you. I'm Danita Price, Pioneer Human Services. This is my first opportunity to be a part of this group. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here. And one of the things that I'm excited about is it was actually someone else that said it. Gabriella said it's the untapped ideas that we now have a space to voice them. Whereas possibly before we have this amazing, grandiose idea, maybe a little bit in theory, which is a little bit my thing, because I can think in theory and how do you make it practical. But now we have a group of people that we can throw those theories out and someone can make them practical and tangible. Just like Tristan said, I love it.
Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for adding to the chat. Any other things that folks might want to give voice to? Thanks for adding some of those. Yeah, Tristan, I thought it was interesting, you know, as we heard from the peers that some of these unexpected, you know, really some ways tragic and traumatic events that have been experienced and spread inequitably around COVID or the flooding have actually been opportunities for the North Sound ACH to kind of exhibit values, to adapt and kind of start to learn what the value proposition could be and kind of a new set of partners that are around the table. So it's been really interesting to see opportunities to kind of live out values in ways that were a little bit unexpected. So nice to hear that reflection. A commitment to working upstream to make a difference, also deconstructing process to find out how we can be more effective. So a lot of ideas around being more effective, being place-based, being co-located. Marilyn Scott, welcome.
Hi, Monty. I just wanted to share that in our group, we had an individual from the health department that was new to the ACH as a participant with the ACH. So I was able to share a lot of the foundational history about the ACH with the new representative that had not yet had a lot of experience with the ACH. So that kind of helped with, I didn't realize that we still have individuals that are either working at various partner agencies that have not had exposure or are not familiar with the work of the ACH. So the breakout was very good, and having a few individuals get together and just share and have the questions talking about the initiative. So thank you, Haishka.
Thank you, Marilyn, and looking forward to your thoughts tomorrow. Just a little bit of a foreshadowing. Thank you for all the comments in the chat, Xenia, for partnership and reminder around whose voices we need to be more inclusive of and centering on. And tomorrow we're going to actually have a lot more space to kind of pick up on these ideas of where we've been and where we want to go in some breakouts, but this is a little bit of an appetizer. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Michaela just to briefly introduce our break, and we're going to then break for about 10 minutes. So Michaela, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here. Okay, thank you for passing it over to me. So I'm here to introduce the movement break. So please, if you wish, take this time to get some water, use the restroom. But while we're taking this break, we're going to be showing a few slides, a slideshow from, it's art from a local artist. So the bio reads, Salish artist Sienum Jason LaClair was born in June of 1983 to Karen Cook James of the Nooksack tribe and Wilbert Paul LaClair of the Lummi Nation. Jason's grandma and grandpa are John and Harriet Sparrow Cook on his mom's side, and also Helen Lane and Cyril Smokey LaClair of Lummi Nation. And what we're going to show is some rotating art, and this rotating art is another way to honor the native stewards of the land, moving beyond just land acknowledgements. And we hope that you enjoy this art created by local artist Jason LaClair. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. We'll enjoy the art, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes.
We utilize the resources out here in this bay. The reason we chose the theme honoring the Salish Sea was to honor the sea that provided for us for thousands of years.
We'll get started here in just 1 minute. Welcome back as folks are making their way back into the space. Amanda, thanks for your comments. I'm reading Amanda's comment. Thank you for bringing art into this space. We recognize how important it is for people of our community, and this is great to see you feel the same. Jason's art is so powerful and beautiful. Thank you. You know, I think I've heard from a number of you, and I've felt the same having a chance, you know, looking at you, Marco, on my screen, the learning session that we had around art as resistance, as a vehicle for social change and as a bridging instrument was so incredibly powerful. And it's really great to see art increasingly embedded into the work of this network, and appreciate all who kind of help bring Jason's work into the space today. It is really powerful. And want to introduce you to a colleague and really a friend, Dr. Kimberly Barrett, who I've gotten to know over the last few years, who is from the Fox Cities area in Wisconsin. And Kimberly, for the last 30 years, has been really a leader, leading voice in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, across a lot of sectors, across in academia and businesses, and across not-for-profits and in communities, and have gotten to know some of her work as she's been a civic leader, as a volunteer, thinking about bridging and belonging. So I think, Kimberly, you're going to share a little bit around what does this look like from your own personal experiences? What does it look like in the context of community and grounding us in some practices around bridging and belonging, as Liz pointed out, which has been both a core value, goal, and practice of this network. It'll be fun to kind of hear what that looks like in a different community and a different voice. So welcome, Kimberly.
Well, thank you so much, Monty. And I'm especially, happy to have an opportunity to talk to this group, not only to share some of the civic work that I've been doing with Imagine Fox Cities, but also to help people understand why this is so important to me on a personal basis. So I'm going to take a minute and share my screen if I can. I have a few PowerPoints. Let's see here. Slideshow. Okay, great. So bridging and belonging, keys to creating more just communities. And as I've heard, you all are well on the way to really making significant change in your communities. You know, I always like to start with thinking about structures. And I'm preaching to the choir when it comes to that. You all probably are well aware of this, well-known saying by Audre Lorde, for the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They will allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. And I think what you all are trying to do with your targeted universalism, with the work that you're doing in your communities, is bring about genuine change to move us from a paradigm of competition and even holding people who are different in contempt to one where we are focused on collaboration and compassion that really sort of enables us to work with each other in ways that acknowledge and honor our common humanity across our differences. Let's see here. So just a little bit about my journey. This is me. And, I've always been a person who has been somewhat the odd person out. I was born, I'm dating myself now, in the midst of the civil rights movement. So I've always been in integrated schools. My father was in the Army, lived in integrated neighborhoods. And so I was always, one of a few, if not the only, in school, in leadership positions, that kind of thing. And so early on, although I always thought that, the world was my oyster, so to speak, I always felt like I had to create spaces and would change spaces that I moved into. And that's why this James Baldwin quote, when I talk about and think about belonging, really resonates with me. The place in which I will fit will not exist until I make it. And so this idea of co-creating belonging has always been something that I've understood from a childhood, even though I didn't have the words for it until graduate school probably. And when you run into the glass ceilings and the systemic discrimination in the workplace, your perspective changes a bit. And then I began to get the theory and the language in graduate school to describe some of those issues. But in addition to, my growing up in the South during the Civil Rights Movement, being very hopeful about change and taking for granted, this myth of the meritocracy. Also, as an adult, my partner was someone who, people assumed to be white. And then, much to my surprise, I had a little blonde baby boy, which also sort of contributed to my deeper understanding of issues of belonging, the need to bridge, and also the social construction of race. And in fact, one of the reasons why I was so, I was so grateful for this opportunity is my husband is actually an elder in the Samish Indian Nation, and my son is a citizen. And so, even though we've never lived in Washington State, we've really been made to feel like we belong as part of that community with all of the communications that we received from the Samish. So thank you if there's anyone out there from that community. We really feel like we belong, even though we are, many, many miles away. Again, as I think about my experiences growing up, this Herman Hesse quote, it's never really been about becoming somebody other than who I am. I've always embraced my uniqueness, but I've always been open to recognizing other people and acknowledging the value in what they have, and maybe even being influenced by that and part of becoming who I will be, one day. So this Herman Hesse quote really resonates with me, and I actually used it as part of my renewing of the vows with my husband in our 10-year wedding anniversary. So just a little bit about me there. And that was my son as a child. Here's my son at his wedding photo. Just thought I'd let you get a look at him as an adult. I'm very proud of him, obviously, and he's certainly part of my journey in understanding the struggles with belonging and bridging that we all go through. So just so we can be clear, again, I know that I am speaking to the choir here, but just so that we're clear and have the same understanding of what we're talking about, I thought we should quickly go through some terms. Belonging is really about knowing that you matter to a group of which you are a part. It's being valued for what you contribute and embraced for who you are, your authentic self. It's understanding your agency and the influence within the group. And this last part about understanding your agency was really driven home to me by the work of the Othering and Belonging group. When I looked at their materials, we always talk about valuing folks and feeling part of community, but also there's a critical piece in understanding your own agency, which is part of belonging, that you can really sort of impact the group. And it's really sort of an affective or emotional consequence of truly being included. And to me, what helps me operationalize this idea of belonging, which can really seem sort of nebulous, is the work that's been done on mattering. And there's been a lot of work done with adult students in higher education on mattering. And it really impacts how folks are willing to engage with the community. And it's about ego extension. It's about not only feeling valued, but also knowing that people are depending on you. And when you succeed, they'll be happy. And if you fail, they're going to be right there, lifting you up and sort of mourning that loss with you. It really is a way of recognizing our interdependence. So mattering to me is a way to really sort of operationalize what it means to belong, that ego extension and that interdependence. that is part of belonging. And then bridging is a critical tool to making that connection that is so essential to belonging. And if you've heard from John Powell, I'm sure you've heard about bridging. And it's really sort of how do you make meaningful connections with an individual or group that you believe is different from you in some significant way for some common good, some common purpose that you have. And it could be, just understanding, cultural diversity better, or it could be a common problem like some of the issues that you all are working on, like the opioid crisis or food insecurity. And the focus is not on persuasion or changing people's mind. It's really about listening and learning from each other. And ironically, if you're familiar with the research on changing folks' mind, the way to do that most effectively is to begin by learning. So bridging is an important skill that is essential for creating a environment in which belonging exists. And so what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you some examples from Imagine Fox Cities, again, just quickly, but really want to focus on what it is as individuals we can do. We talk a lot about things theoretically with systems, but systems are made up of individuals. And so we're the ones who are going to have to change the practice and change the way things are done through an everyday practice of inclusion and belonging. So as you've probably heard from Monty, Imagine Fox Cities, it's a regional visioning initiative, and it's focused on well-being and growing the region's prosperity through focusing on community vitality. It was a initiative that was created by community members. We consulted with national experts like Monty and Stacy, and we used data to shape a vision for our community. We did an initial survey of more than 3,000 folks and 80 focus groups to come up with the vision initially. And then we just recently finished our second survey and look at well-being last year, and we were just sharing the results a few months ago. We're about to go into a series of convenings later this month. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my cursor. Okay. So the vision that was developed from that first set of data and a convening of more than 300 people, from high school students to community leaders, was based on 4 pillars: a positive path for kids, an economy that works for all, and widely shared spaces and culture, as well as a place where all belong. And the belonging really stood out because if we were looking at the economy, if we were looking at mental health, if we were looking at education, the thing that bubbled up in our convenings in all of those things was that people really felt like inclusion and belonging was a key to creating a better future together, to make sure that we all prosper and experience well-being. Okay. And so you all are familiar with the vital conditions. One of our survey items in the 2019 survey looked at, the 2021 survey looked at what creates well-being. And of course, one of the big factors, not surprisingly, was this issue of belonging. So we also asked, what is the biggest hindrance that keeps people from experiencing well-being? And also belonging, health, and safety, again, were the most significant factors. And so we'd already identified this as a need. And so right before the pandemic, we stood up a working group, a committee on belonging, which I co-chaired with a gentleman from Kimberly Clark. And we had a variety of members interested in different constituencies, BIPOC, youth, elderly. And we came up with a purpose to really try to serve as a catalyst to help people understand this idea of belonging. What are the needs? How can we make sure that everyone sees themselves reflected in the work that we're doing in Imagine Fox Cities and, you know, throughout the region? And then we also had some objectives, you know, so that we can measure it as we went along to educate the community about what it means to belong, provide opportunities for engagement and activities that sort of promote these underlying, you know, conditions for belonging, empathy, trust, mutual understanding, and cooperation. Because as you can imagine, the number one thing that, you know, inhibits belonging is this idea of distrust. And we've had, you know, centuries of distrust among various communities that make up the Fox cities in the United States, the Americas. So what are some examples of the things that we've done to create a sense of belonging? These won't be surprising to you. We had convenings the summer after the murder of George Floyd. We had a virtual convening on anti-racism, belonging, and community. We had over 800 people register for that in this sort of more rural Wisconsin area. We had, I'd say, over 600 people who actually consistently, you know, stayed with us for that half-day convening. We've also had a number of dialogues dealing, we used the living room conversations model as sort of a template, but then put our own information in it to look at, we had a series of 3 that were race, anti-racism, and inclusion. And then we also had a series on social status, which looked at privilege, class, and bridging. And then finally, we looked at belonging. We thought it was really important for people to understand these sort of fundamental topics before we, you know, talked about how they all can inhibit or contribute belonging. We also are looking at how can we assess this idea of belonging, and we came up with a working definition for belonging that basically had 3 parts: feeling part of community, valued for who you are and what you bring. And so we have a few you know, items that we're using on surveys to try and assess that. And then we're collaborating, doing some important collaboration with other communities. We also had a convening on policing. So a 3-part convening on that, and have been in collaboration with some of our police departments and their advisory boards. But we're also working with our Multicultural Communications Committee that really was stood up again right around the time of the pandemic and ended up doing vaccination clinics, but also works to make sure that people have critical information about services just in time, that also celebrates the culture and is culturally responsive. So those are some of the things, we're just some examples of what we're doing in the Fox cities. There's a lot going on there. Another huge initiative is an initiative called Common Ground, which is another sort of difficult dialogue groups that has looked at race, political difference, religious differences, and even most recently had a dialogue around abortion, around the abortion issue. So, so really trying to do these very relevant opportunities for people to build the skills to have the difficult dialogue. One of the things that we thought was important was we don't have the opportunity these days to talk to people who think differently, because we not only are segregated in, you know, schools where we live, where we worship, we also are segregated in terms of ideology. And so we thought it was important to provide opportunities for people to have skill building, safe places to do this skill building and to bridge. And then nationally, of course, there's a number of initiatives from the Other and Belonging Institute, You all have, embraced targeted universalism. There's also online bridging courses that are happening. And I wonder from you all, what are some of the other things that are going on that you're aware of that create a sense of belonging? Do you mind putting in, I'd like for you, if you don't mind, to take a second and just put in the chat some of the things that you're aware of, because there's lots of things that are going on out there to try and create a sense of belonging that center the voices of the marginalized, and also provide some opportunities for us to engage with difference in ways that we don't normally have the opportunity to do. Can we just take 2 seconds and put those in the chat? I'm going to look at the chat for just a second here. Human library, yeah. Wonderful. Great. So lots of things going on. And, I think that just to lift up this idea of art as a bridge, often we can sort of illustrate things that are difficult to put into words through art. So thank you for that session during our break. Let's see now. So let's talk a little bit more about bridging and the art of bridging. To me, there's courses on it. There's a playbook that, Greater Good Science Center has on it. But I think we all have the ability within us, just if we have a bit of courage, humility, kind curiosity, and compassion, with the commitment to connect. But there does take some preparation. When you think about bridging, you think about it as something that you're doing externally with people. It's an interpersonal thing, but there's a lot of interpersonal work that needs to happen as well. As we prepare to bridge. Bridging isn't for everybody. I think for most of it's a good thing, and we all need to have the skills, but it's not always appropriate. You risk being rebuffed. People might not want to bridge with you. The people you want to bridge with you risk having some strong emotional reactions. You also risk being changed. And so, you can't get too caught up in the righteousness of your own path if you want to bridge. And so here's some things that you need to keep in mind as you prepare to bridge. Think about ways to mitigate your implicit biases, deepen your emotional intelligence, both your ability to understand your own feelings and other people's feelings, and then practice mindfulness. And if any of you are familiar with the research on mindfulness, it really seems that it's able to help us diminish our biases in many ways. Our biases like our correspondence bias, our negativity bias, our self-positivity bias that we all have, let alone it makes us slow down so that we don't sort of act automatically on these associations we have that create the stereotypes that really sort of influences our decision and our behavior in very negative ways. So mindfulness, I think, is a very powerful part of preparing ourselves for being able to bridge. And of course, external work determine your intentions. If it's to listen and learn and connect, then you're good. Expand your social circles, Again, many of us live in situations and work in situations where there's not a lot of diversity. So we need to expand that, get out of our comfort zone. And then we need to practice compassionate communication, both listening and speaking, and try to avoid, violent communication. So I want to stop for a minute, and I'm going to ask you all to participate in an activity with me that really is an example of mindfulness and how you might begin to cultivate a mindset for bridging. And I think there are two kinds of meditations or mindfulness activities that are particularly helpful in this regard. One of them is called a loving kindness meditation, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, and there's all kinds of versions of them, running from 6 minutes to 40 minutes. We're going to do a short one right now, just to give you a taste of it. And the other one is gratitude. And I've heard today a lot of, expressions of gratitude and appreciation, but making that part of a daily practice of mindfulness is important as well for cultivating a mindset for bridging. And so I'm going to ask you to, put your feet on the floor. And if you're able and willing to just close your eyes and sitting in a comfortable upright position, put feet on the floor and begin to bring your awareness inward. Take a couple of deep breaths in and then let them out slowly. Now, breathing normally, turn your attention to your breath. With each breath, relax your body, beginning with your face, your neck, your shoulders, your arms, your chest, your stomach, your legs, all the way down to your feet. Now think of someone you love. It can be a friend, a family member, or a romantic partner. Picture them standing at your side with their hand on your shoulder. That person is sending you wishes for your well-being, health, and happiness. Feel the warmth and caring come to you from that person. Send the love you feel back to them by silently repeating the following phrases. Just as I wished you, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wished you, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wished to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, and may you be free from pain. Now imagine that you are surrounded by people who you have loved and who have loved you. Take a moment to bask in the emotional warmth of the love and kindness that surrounds you. Now, keeping your eyes closed, bring your mind back to this place and imagine the people in this Zoom room with you, both the individuals you know well and the ones with whom you are casually acquainted. These people are like you. They wish to be happy. Send them love and warm wishes by silently repeating the following phrases. Just as I wished to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wish to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wish to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Now picture a person with whom you have conflict or dislike. That person and you are alike. Just like you, they wish to be happy. Share loving kindness with that person by silently repeating the following phrases. Just as I wish to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wish to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wish to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, and may you be free from pain. Now expand your awareness to the entire planet. Picture a globe filled with all the living things on Earth, particularly those who might be suffering. Remember the feelings of peace and contentment you felt when surrounded by loved ones. Send these feelings of compassion to all living beings around the world who, like you, want to be happy by silently repeating the following. Just as I wish to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wish to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Just as I wish to, may you live with ease, may you be safe, may you be free from pain. Now bring your attention back to your breath. Put your hands on your heart. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Notice how you feel in this moment. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Let's go back. So that's just a quick, example of a mindfulness exercise. And research indicates that if you do something like this, try to do it every day, a few times a week, for 12, 15 minutes, that you can really see significant changes, not only in your own sort of focus and attention and intentionality, but also your ability to be compassionate towards others and to really have the mindset to empathize and connect and to listen without judgment, which is what compassionate listening is all about. Okay, so what I'd like to do is to spend some time, give you all just a chance to spend some time talking in small groups about your experiences with bridging and belonging. As I said earlier, I know that I'm speaking to the choir, and I know you all have some things to share. And so I'd like to take about 15 minutes for you to discuss 3 questions. And I'd like for everybody to have the chance to speak. If you don't get through all 3 questions, that's okay. But just give some thought to a time when you truly felt that you belonged. And what are some of the ways that you and groups of which you are a part invite newcomers to co-create belonging? Remember, this is really about how do you develop a daily practice of, belonging and inclusion. And then finally, discuss a strategy that you found effective in bridging with people you perceive to be different from yourself in some significant way. So we're going to take about 15 minutes and break you into small groups. And I guess it would be Tiffany. Can you work your magic for us and break us into small groups?
Thank you, Tiffany.
I didn't want to come back. I wanted to stay in that space.
Were you ready to nap?
No, just it was a nice respite.
Mm. Yeah. She has a soothing voice, Kimberly.
Yeah, yeah.
Stacy and I've had some interesting experiences with her in the middle of a very red state to watch Kimberly hold space in groups that are not always so inclusive. It's been instructive.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I think just I more than anything, I think just teeing up the fact that folks are going to get to intersect with each other tomorrow. Would be great.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. So can I get some volunteers, folks to share some insights or even some strategies that they talked about in their groups? And I'm gonna probably close the. We have about 5 minutes. Great. Okay, great. Let's. I'm gonna try to stop sharing. Can I stop sharing my screen? I want to do my next, okay, let me share my screen here. And let me finish it up. And I'd like to see you all on the screen again. So insights and reflections and my thank you. So if we can I'll stop sharing my screen, and then if we can see as many people as possible on the screen. Era?
Yes, it's pronounced Aura, just for clarification. Very phonetic, Aura. So one of the things we talked about in terms of belonging and bridging, I just wanted to share one of my insights that I had shared in my group was in the time of just learning about DEIB, just like the realm, the professional realm of it all. One of the things that I've really had to unlearn, and I think that's something we don't put enough emphasis on when we're doing DEIB work or equity or inclusion belonging, we have to unlearn a lot. And one of the things I've had to unlearn was who created these systems in the first place, and who said I have to work within these systems? Who says that I cannot think up of something new to work outside? Who said the pie was only this big? Who said the table was only this big? It certainly didn't have my input, and historically it did not have a lot of input from a lot of the folks I'm seeing here. So I think unlearning this is the box you have to work within, and realizing, oh, I can just open the door and step out of that box. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I think it's a multi-pronged approach where I do love working within these existing systems, because I believe that internal change can happen, and at the same time empowering folks to come up with new ideas and create systems outside of what outside of what already exists. And it could be a variety of things. It could be an internal agency, could be your local government. It could be just like how a certain policy has been put in place, but realizing, oh, it's so much bigger than what we've been told, and feeling empowered in that way. That is the kind of power that's how I want to bridge that gap. Creating more feelings of belonging, creating these feelings of I am empowered. I can actually do this. I don't have to stick within the box. And then moving forward from that. So one of the things I really work with is becoming a conduit of power. as I have platforms to speak, just like here, I want to make sure it's like, I have a message, I want to empower others, and let's pass it along. Like, I am not here to accumulate power for myself. And so shifting that mindset of power means something that will corrupt you to power is something that can be shared and is infinite has been so beneficial in helping bridge those connections and also empower those feelings of belonging. Especially when you don't see other people who don't look like you or share your lived experience, which happens to me like 95% of the time.
Right, great. Thank you. Aura. Did I get it right? Okay. Thank you. Who else? That was such a powerful point. We need to take a moment and digest it all, but thank you so much for that. Unlearning. We talk about learning, and that's important, but unlearning these systems. Thank you. 2 participants raised their hand. Okay, Beverly and then Nicole.
Yeah, well, we had, Aura, thank you so much. We had some similar conversation with different words in our group. And it would have been wonderful if we could have had some of those words in Spanish as well. Really appreciating the part about what has already created this gathering and in our continual gatherings is the economic privilege and the time to have this, this ability to connect with one another that is very unique, and it is exclusive, and we're speaking English. We're doing it in a timely and articulate way, and that we don't have other means of communication and connecting. And that's, partly Zoom and COVID, but also what we have built and created. So there are ways that we're still being exclusive or exclusionary that we have to keep looking at. So I am always telling myself I've been socialized and I'm continuing to unlearn that socialization. I have those, inherent traits of what I heard from my mom and dad or whatever. So those are the pieces that we were talking about as well within ours. So do we even need to have that table that we gather at, or do we build a new table together?
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Nicole.
Yeah, we 3 of us struggled with actually the first question, feeling like, have we ever felt truly belong? Like, have we belonged somewhere? And how surprisingly kind of triggering that is, of like, why is that, and what's the history of that? And I think that also made us very good of like, we have strategies for the 3rd question of approaches that we have found helpful, because maybe perhaps we would like those. And I think there was a good consensus. Number 3 feels like one-on-one human interaction. Number 2 feels like organizationally, how do we embrace newcomers? And that perhaps, Beth, what did you say? We're not bad at it. We're not ready for it.
Growth mindset, Nicole.
Growth mindset.
We're not there yet.
We're not there. That's what you said. Thank you. So I even saw that question prepping for this. I work for the ACH, and I'm thinking like, that is a hard question. And Beth was saying the same thing. So I just wanted to call that one out.
Great. Do we have time for one more comment, Monty? Okay. Who had Vanessa?
Hi, thank you for this space. I just wanted to say, I also work for North Sound ACH, and I just really appreciate the first conversation, and thank you for calling that out to both of you. And I think number 1 was mostly like I shared, it was about me. Growing up, I'm a Latina, I'm Indigenous, I'm also Scottish. I have a very Scottish last name. So not having that belonging, I code switched a lot, right? Whichever family I was visiting, I was code switching. And that code switching is, I was very Latina with my Latino family, and I was very Indigenous with my Indigenous family. And when I was with, I didn't have many, like we didn't embrace the Scottish side, but it was all sorts of code switching. So as I learned, and as I've grown in ACH, and just as a person, I've learned to accept that those 3 things are not separate of me, but they are all of me. So when I start doing that, I start to feel that I belong belonged. And so when I started to gain that power, I was like, well, I belong everywhere then, because I'm all three things, and I'm human, and I'm a female, and I have all these powerful parts of me. And part of that was a father who just said, you have, instead of saying, sometimes fathers can be like, make yourself smaller, just to protect us. But he was like, you have four amazing things. You're Mexican, you're indigenous, you're a woman, you're this, and and it was very like, find your voice. So as I'm growing in my space and as my person and belonging to myself, I can have space and allow, maybe not allow is the right word, but to just provide space for people to belong to me and me to them. And that's what's causing that co-creation and that belonging, because I belong to them and they belong to me, because I come to that space authentically. And I just would love for somebody to come into that space with me authentically. And that gets really woohoo for people, very like, oh, I don't like that. That's not very good. And I accept that. And I try not to push my like really that big space of that, but just the strategy of belonging to myself to belong to other people is that bridging. And I think no matter what you do in life, whether it's your career, your relationships, your coworkers, and anything, I think once you create that space for yourself, you can create it anywhere you go. And for me, that's super important.
What a wonderful last comment. I really appreciate that. That's what it's all about. Being authentically who you are and inviting other folks in. And so really appreciate that. And, one thing we need to remember is, and we talked about this in the group I was in, unfortunately, I wasn't somebody's group as a facilitator, but one of the things that we talked about was, the fact that this is a learning process. We're unlearning. And sometimes we have to learn before we know what we need to unlearn, but it's a process of growth and development. I heard the growth mindset, and that we're never really going to get there. We're going to get better and better and closer approximations to where we need to be. But it's always, change is going to continue to happen, and we're going to continue to need to grow. It's an iterative process. And so, I just want to say, keep that in mind. Allow some space for grace for yourself, and for other folks as we, work together.
And I'm also Samish too, Kimberly. Thank you. I was going to also say that when you said it, I was like, oh, we're cousins.
Yes.
We're family.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. This has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, Kimberly, thank you for being here. I know we just have a minute or so to wrap up, but really appreciate you bringing your experiences and being so generous with your insights. And I think we all hope that you live with ease and be safe and free of pain. And I know how heartfelt that is from you. And so it's been a great day. I know there may be a slide or two, Elizabeth, as we're pulling this up. I think we can touch base maybe tomorrow on the resource library, just to honor time. A little bit of a request in the spirit of art. What's songs that keep you going? What songs do you turn to when you need to be energized or re-energized? So would love for you to add that to the chat or email the North Sound as we create kind of our collective playlist. So be thinking of that. And, today was all about grounding ourselves in where we've been, where we're heading, why we do what we do, what our shared values are, including, being grounded in not just the goal of belonging, but as Liz suggested, and, Kimberly reminded us of being intentional with the practice of bridging and belonging and the possibilities of really doing that, not as an abstract form. And I love kind of alluding to what John Powell said, that, belonging is an act of co-creation. It is about agency. It is about collective power for the common good. And I think tomorrow we're going to step into a really interesting space to say, what would it look like for us to fundamentally disrupt systems, to invest differently in intergenerational well-being, to what that could look like, both of our time, our effort, our resources, where we have influence. So we're going to spend some time. Zini is going to help lead some of that with our partners at Rethink Health. And then there's going to be a lot more time and space across cohorts for us to really be thinking about what the implications are for how we move forward together. And so it's going to be a great day tomorrow. I'm really looking forward. We're going to have a little bit more time and really appreciate everybody being here. And so on that note, we'll let folks go and enjoy the rest of your day. So thank you so much, and we will see you in early tomorrow. Thanks again, Kimberly, for being with us.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Monty, before everybody jumps off, Kimberly, can I just ask, do you have a hard stop right now? Or did she already jump off?
Sorry, no, I'm here. No, I was having trouble with mute.
Only, and again, we can let everyone go. There was a question that was posed like right around 4 o'clock in the chat box for you specifically. I just didn't know if you had some time to try and respond to that before.
Sure, I didn't see it. Let's see. Do you have it up?
I do. It's before everyone started putting their music in. It's from Mateo, so I'll just read it.
Okay.
Kimberly, when you talk about belonging to a group, is that based off of identity and or shared knowledge / analysis? I'm also curious, how do you generate belonging in a space where the inclusion of one group automatically creates othering for another?
Well, those are all complicated, issues and layers, because belonging is sort of multidimensional. And I think that, first of all, I think, centering people who have less power, have been marginalized, is one way to address that. But I think this idea of authenticity, non-judgment, because I think all of us have to come to that space with some non-judgment and being open to be in that space. Yeah, let me look at the question again. That's a layered question. And so Mateo, if you're on, could you do a follow-up? I can stay for a few more minutes if folks can. I can stay until 6:15. Let's try and not to belabor the point.
Yeah. Just for clarity, that'll be 4:15 on our side of the world.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, we don't want to keep it going.
Otherwise, we'll take advantage of the whole extra 2 hours.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so I'm sorry, Mateo, if you could just clarify. I think that when you talk about belonging, there's sort of our aspirational belonging and our current state belonging, right? And so you need to provide, you all have heard of roots and wings. So you need to provide spaces, or, where people feel, groups where they feel like they can be who they are. They don't have to explain themselves now. And then there are aspirational spaces where we all should feel, included. This sort of universal design of our communities and our spaces, quite literally. But why could you we actually probably experienced that with some of our the dialogues with the police. We had to create space for folks who have been traumatized, by their interactions with the police, not to be part of the bridging dialogue, so providing a different space for those folks to have input. And then we were the bridge, we were the conduit for those folks and their concerns. I don't know if that, can you say a little bit more about what you were asking?
Sure, glad to try. I'm happy to try.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I think for me, right, in my understanding of this work, is that like belonging is both, right, based off of identity and shared knowledge and analysis. And when I think shared knowledge, some folks tend to call that like lived expertise or similar like lived experiences. And I also think, right, shared analysis is like viewing systems critically, right? I'm not suggesting group think where everyone thinks the same, right? But having an understanding that kind of what Ara was naming, right? Like there is this shared understanding of how systems are operating, right? And then the history of those systems is also important to know. And I think, right, certain folks' identities identities can also be a way of generating a sense of belonging, right? But it's neither just one or the other. I think it is both of those things. And I think because a lot of folks here don't share, right, identities and do not share lived experiences and analysis, I'm not saying that we haven't, right? But no two in the same. And so I think there's always a sense of othering that happens in a lot of these groups. Yeah, and so a lot came up for me there as we were talking about belonging. And I think, sorry, I think particularly for me as well, like with the identities and experiences that I hold, right? Like I don't see other like queer, brown, like non-binary, gender non-conforming, like people on a call who grew up in poverty, right? Who did X, Y, and the third in the same region. And I think, right, I don't know that I will feel the same sense of belonging as someone who hasn't had those identities or experiences. So I think that's where that question comes from, and happy to speak to the other one as well.
Yeah, I think that to me, that's where the co-creation comes in, where we have to do the work of belonging and the work of bridging. And, you know, there's belonging isn't something that the type of belonging we're talking about isn't something that, you know, is necessarily automatic. It's something that we do have to create, and it's not just existing, particularly given the world that we live in today. And so that's why we have to be very intentional about creating it. I think that, you know, there are some limits in terms of bridging, whether or not you are ready to bridge or should bridge, or, you know, it's a thing that would be beneficial for you. But I think that belonging is active, and it's something that is, you know, we have to create together. So I'm kind of going around in circles. Does anybody else have something they'd like to add to that? But I hear you, and I understand what you're saying. And I think that until we create this better society, sometimes we have to, that's why it's a both and, the roots and wings, you know, building people up with folks, creating spaces for folks with similar identities and experiences, so that then, you know, they can then help change places and spaces where they don't belong. So, and they're not doing that alone. You might want to have the last word on that.
No, you know, I just want to thank you, and thank you, Mateo, for raising the question, and thank you, Kimberly, for staying on. Oh, wait, Marco and Ara both want to jump in. I see two more hands.
Okay.
We've got 5 more minutes of Kimberly's time to use, so go, Marco.
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Mateo. That's an important question. I just wanted to, Kimberly, just ask you real quick. Did you say the roots and wings? Is that what you said?
Yeah, roots and wings. The idea that sort of providing spaces where people can be with people that they identify with, you know, based on who they are, their experiences, that kind of thing. And then wings sort of then together based on that supportive feeling and feeling validated, being able to help change, fly into the larger institutions and change them. So roots and wings. So grounding, feeling supported, and then wings to help make that change in spaces where you wouldn't, you know, automatically feel like you belong.
Ara, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, just because I'm a chatty Cathy, and this is just like sparking a lot of thoughts in my brain, especially because of Mateo's question. And going back to Kimberly's point, where we have to create those spaces, it goes all the way back to that quote at the beginning, right, by James Baldwin. We have to carve out these spaces for ourselves for 2 reasons. One, if you are like from a historically marginalized community and you have all these different intersecting identities, more than likely there is not a space built for you. And so as we continue to work up in the IB, and there are platforms where people like me, queer people of color, and other folks, indigenous folks, BIPOC folks, like all of a sudden there is this opportunity within these systems that we all like exists within our agencies, our like workplaces, where, hey, we want to focus specifically on elevating these historically marginalized communities. So we need someone from that lived experience. We are finally, for the first time in history, I'm going to say, having these platforms of leadership. So in order for us to create, like we're moving forward with no blueprint here. So we have to create the spaces and define them clearly. This is what belonging means. We're not going to have clear-cut answers. And as we continue building and really, really strengthening that idea of like, this is what belonging means in this space, then it will empower others to, hey, I can do that too. Hey, I can step up. Oh, look at this. This is a system I used to think was this way, but now it's been changed. So right now we're creating that foundation to create better opportunities of belonging with historically marginalized communities. And also to talk about the second point, what if someone's inclusion in that space of belonging means like, so another group is going to be an outsider, right? Part of creating that space of belonging is having those community guidelines, making sure that if you are entering that space, including this space, you are ready to hear some hard truths. You're going to be listening to a lot of folks who are talking about the harm they have felt, about not feeling like they belong. It's going to be hard. If you want to be an accomplice, you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with those feelings of discomfort. Right. And if you're not ready for that unlearning, if you're not ready for that relearning, then you shouldn't be approaching that space. And that's really hard. That is a really hard point to come to, as like we see other folks who want to be allies, who want to be accomplices. So that's also a lot of the foundational work. But if you're going to enter there as a person with a lot of privilege, you got to be ready to take a back seat. You got to be ready to be like, I want to make sure you are actively involved in making sure that you are creating that space of belonging and making sure that your presence does not exclude others. And that's a lot of personal learning that needs to happen. And that can be really, really difficult. And I want to acknowledge the difficulty of that situation. So for folks here who show up as accomplices and wanting to move this work forward, awesome. If you're not really ready to move that work forward, then maybe you should just, maybe the space isn't for you. But a lot of that belonging work, really, it's starting with us. And that's hard when we don't have any other, what are we gonna compare it to? Right. There's nothing historically that we can. So let's make it a place where we get to define who feels like they belong. We get to define that space. So we really just have to take that agency into our hands. And I know that's like a non-answer and kind of a little hard to like swallow, but I really think that's where we are. That's the work we have to do here.
I think it's the only answer that you can give. You did it much more articulately than I did. So, so I think it's a very good answer because it's a work in progress. So, yeah. Great.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm going to probably repeat what's already been said, but as a brown woman who grew up in extreme poverty in the Bronx, who came from an incredibly diverse family, who is a lesbian, who had both child by birth and kids that I've adopted, there's never been a place that looks like me. And so, you know, we've had earlier conversations about whether safe spaces, there has like never been a safe space. And I so appreciated last month when, you know, Mariana suggested we needed brave spaces instead of safe spaces. I think that's the piece that keeps me going and wakes me up every day, is the opportunity, Mateo or Marco, to create that space. Because I don't think somebody's got a model for us to use. Right. But I think there's an opportunity for us to create a new model, and we may stumble. And, you know, I'm going to keep hearing Ben Duncan in my head, fail forward, but there wasn't a model for me when I was 25. There wasn't a model for me when I was 40. But I just look at the folks who are still on this call and I think, but we can create that. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be messy. But I don't know, I have a lot of confidence. Every time you all stay on a call after we told you could hang up, I just I get more confident that like we can do this. But just thank you. I appreciate this so much. And there's a lot more that I'm going to probably carry for the next 2 hours, but yeah, Kimberly, thank you for like staying on with us. And
yeah. And I want to thank Mateo for that question that really gets at the nuance of this work.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you all. Great appreciation. Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.